When he said, "You can't live without me," I was slicing tomatoes. He didn't say it during a fight. He said it quietly, calmly, with a smile, as if it were a love poem and not a warning. I met him at my cousin's wedding. His hair was slightly messy, coffee cup in hand, and his gaze burned through the room. "You're different," he said the moment we spoke, and I sank into those words like warm water. Narcissists love in ways that feel like poetry, until every line starts to bleed. In the beginning, he texted me constantly, "Good morning, beautiful," before I even opened my eyes. "I'm thinking of you by lunchtime, and I want to fall asleep next to you every night." I answered immediately. I wanted to be the woman he had been waiting for his whole life. But soon, replying in 3 minutes instead of 1 was betrayal. That's how it started. A cold shift, a tightened jaw, a withdrawal. "If you loved me, why didn't you answer sooner?" And I apologized for going to the bathroom. Slowly, he closed off my world. "Your friend uses you," so I stopped texting her. "Your mom never understood you," so I stopped calling her. "Your job drains you," so I quit. I stayed in his apartment while he monitored me through messages, asking what I was wearing, who I had liked on Instagram, why I commented on that post. And when he didn't like my answers, came the silent treatment. The kind of silence that doesn't just sting, it destroys. Days without a word, his face turned to the wall, a punishment for something I never understood. I remember one night we were supposed to go to his coworker's birthday dinner. I wore the red dress he once said he loved, but the moment he saw me, he grimaced. "You're going out in that?" I changed. 4 times. In the end, we didn't go. He said I embarrassed him. I spent the evening sitting on the closed toilet lid, face in my hands, while he watched TV in the other room. "You don't want to look good for me," he muttered. "You just want attention. You're like all the others." Living with a narcissist means every kind gesture comes with strings. Every compliment becomes a cage. His manipulation felt like protection. His gaslighting sounded like wisdom. Every day was a new test I was destined to fail. And even when I was a shell of myself, I couldn't leave. Because narcissistic abuse rewires your brain, makes you believe you're the toxic one. That without him, you're nothing. I remember showing him a letter I'd written to my grandmother after she passed. I thought it was tender, vulnerable. He rolled his eyes. "You only bring this up to make me feel guilty. You just want to seem deep." When I finally said I needed to go, he cried, for the first time in months. "I'm nothing without you. I'm broken, but you can fix me." And I stayed, because I wanted to be the one who healed him. Loving a narcissist feels like hugging a knife. It hurts, but you can't let go. They say you're their world, just so they can turn off your sun. This morning he texted me, "I miss you. Everything feels empty without you." And I realized I had spent the entire relationship trying to fill the emptiness inside him. But who's going to fill mine? He always came back with softness after the storm. That's the part no one understands. The cruelty was brutal, yes, but the tenderness that followed, that was the real trap. After every episode, every cruel comment, every day of silent treatment, he'd suddenly reappear with eyes full of fake remorse. "I was just scared to lose you. Or worse, I'm damaged, but you're the only one who sees me." And I, the trained victim of psychological abuse, would soften, because I believed I was special, the chosen one, the one woman strong enough to endure his storms. That's the thing about emotional abuse. It doesn't scream. It whispers. It disguises itself as love, as intimacy, as connection. I confused control for protection. I mistook trauma for passion. We had this one night, early on. I had a panic attack after he vanished for 2 days without explanation. When he came back, he found me curled on the floor. He knelt beside me, held my face, and said, "You're so fragile. You need me." But he didn't comfort me. He claimed me. That moment branded me his. I see that now. He'd call me dramatic when I cried. He said I twisted things when I repeated his words back to him. He'd stare at me blankly when I asked for empathy, and then accuse me of emotional blackmail when I begged for affection. He gaslit me so expertly that I stopped trusting my own memory. I kept a secret folder in my phone with screenshots, proof that I wasn't imagining things, proof that I wasn't crazy. But even with evidence, I doubted myself. There was a night, I'll never forget it. We were in the car, driving back from a dinner with his colleagues. I had laughed at a joke one of them made, something innocent. On the way home, he gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. "You flirted with him the whole night." I looked at him, stunned. "What?" I barely spoke to him. "Exactly. That's your game. You act innocent, but I know what you are." I sat there, numb, frozen. The headlights illuminated nothing but the road, but inside the car, the air was thick with accusation. That's how narcissistic control works. It makes you question the most innocent moment until guilt is your default emotion. He would punish me with absence. I used to dread the sound of silence more than any scream. A whole weekend without speaking to me, eating meals with his back turned, refusing to meet my eyes. And when I broke, when I sobbed or begged, he'd sigh and whisper, "See, you're unstable. You always overreact." He stole my joy in such small, meticulous pieces that I didn't realize I was grieving. He wasn't just a narcissist. He was a mirror that reflected only my flaws, and I believed it was my job to earn back the version of me he once admired, the version he created with lies. He didn't break me with fists. He broke me with silence. He didn't want a partner. He wanted a possession. People say, "Why didn't you leave?" But how do you leave someone who convinces you that they're the only one who will ever love you? That everyone else will just hurt you worse? That you're lucky they even chose you? The day I walked out, I didn't feel brave. I felt empty, numb, like a ghost escaping a haunted house, not knowing what's waiting outside. I didn't pack everything. I left my favorite sweater hanging on the chair. I still dream about it sometimes. He still sends messages, still tries to call, still posts songs that we used to listen to, always baiting, always circling. Because for narcissists, the story never ends unless they decide to end it. But this time, I won't answer. I don't know who I am without him, but I'm finally starting to find out. The first morning without him, I sat in my tiny borrowed room and listened to the silence, not the punishing kind he used to weaponize, but real silence. Still, honest, unfamiliar. I thought I would feel free. I didn't. I felt like a failure. That's the aftermath of narcissistic abuse. You don't escape with pride. You escape with broken instincts. I couldn't trust my own decisions anymore. I stared at texts 3 times before hitting send. I apologized to strangers when they bumped into me. I flinched every time my phone buzzed. Every sound felt like a test. Every man I saw reminded me of him. In the curve of a jawline, the way someone laughed too loudly, the way a look lingered just a second too long. Trauma doesn't leave when they do. It nests inside you. I started therapy. The first time I said the word abuse, I whispered it. It didn't feel real. I kept wanting to defend him. But he had a hard childhood, I'd say. But he cried when I left. My therapist looked at me, calm and steady, and asked, "And who cried when you stayed?" I had no answer. Because I had cried every day. I kept remembering small things. The time I made his favorite dinner, and he accused me of trying to manipulate him. The time he deleted my Instagram account without asking. The time I laughed too loud at a party, and he pinched my thigh under the table. Smiling, always smiling. The private punishments. The public charm. That's the narcissist's signature. 2 faces. You only ever see the one they want you to see. I met his mother once. She smiled like she was keeping secrets. When I told her he sometimes ignored me for days, she just said, "That's how he shows he cares. He gets overwhelmed." I didn't realize it then, but I was walking into a lineage of emotional manipulation. The roots ran deep. And still, I missed him. That's the cruelty of it. You miss the highs, the future he sold you, the way he once looked at you like you were magic. You miss the fake version of him that never truly existed. It takes time to accept that the man you loved was only ever a mask. He reached out last month. Voice message. Calm, measured, low. "I just hope you're okay. I've been thinking a lot." It took everything in me not to reply, because I knew that voice. I knew what came next. Love bombing, guilt, control, collapse, repeat. That's how narcissistic cycles work. They always come back for the parts of you they didn't finish breaking. He didn't want me healed. He wanted me hollow enough to control. Every apology he gave was just a reset button for the next round of abuse. Some nights, I still hear his voice in my head, correcting me, mocking me, shaping me. Trauma has its own echo. I carry his cruelty in the way I double-check every word I say, in the way I second-guess every decision, in the way I still sometimes wonder if maybe it was my fault. But then I breathe, and I remember that real love doesn't make you shrink. I no longer romanticize survival, but I honor it. I made it out, barely, slowly, quietly, and maybe that's enough, for now. I still look over my shoulder, but at least I'm walking away. Some days, I still wake up expecting to feel that tightness in my chest, the one I used to carry like a second skin when I lived with him. The feeling that today might be the day I said something wrong, wore something wrong, breathed the wrong way. That today might be the day I was punished with his silence again. That cold, calculated silent treatment that wasn't just quiet. It was psychological warfare. I didn't realize how deeply I had internalized the abuse until I caught myself saying, "sorry," to the mirror. No one was there. No one had yelled. But the programming he left behind ran on autopilot. That's the legacy of narcissistic abuse. It rewires your brain until pain feels like home and control feels like love. There was a moment, a small, stupid moment, when I spilled tea on his white shirt. He looked at me like I'd slapped him. His jaw clenched, his nostrils flared, but he didn't shout. Instead, he stared at me in silence for what felt like hours. And that was worse. Because when a narcissist goes quiet, it's not peace, it's punishment. He didn't speak to me for 3 days. Not even when I cried. Not even when I begged. He watched me unravel in that apartment like it meant nothing. "You need to be more careful," he finally said on the 4th day. Like I was a child. Like I was a burden. I nodded. I always nodded. I learned to nod instead of feel. I couldn't even recognize myself toward the end. My hair was always tied up, no makeup, oversized sweaters. Not because I didn't care, but because I was afraid of being accused of trying to attract other men. He'd call me desperate if I wore perfume, cheap if I smiled at a waiter, disrespectful if I answered a message from a male coworker. That's what control looks like in a narcissistic relationship. It's not always screaming and slamming doors. Sometimes it's a hand on your lower back at a party, pressing just hard enough to remind you you're being watched. Sometimes it's a comment like, "You looked prettier yesterday," right before a big event, just to destabilize you. And sometimes it's just silence, the kind that hollows you out from the inside. There was one night I tried to fight back. We were in the kitchen. He'd just made some passive-aggressive comment about how lucky I was that he tolerated my moods. I turned around and said, "I'm not yours to tolerate." He smiled. That smile will haunt me forever. Calm, confident. "Don't start what you can't finish," he whispered. And then he walked away, leaving me shaking, unsure if I had just won or lost something I didn't even understand. That's the gaslighting. That's the psychological abuse. You speak, you assert, you try to protect your mind, and they twist it into a threat, a weakness, or a joke. You start doubting whether the abuse was real, whether you're exaggerating, whether maybe you really are too sensitive, too emotional, too much. With a narcissist, even your pain becomes a performance, and they're always the audience, never the cause. He made me feel like a guest in my own body. I remember Googling, "Am I in a toxic relationship?" Late one night, in the dark, with one ear alert for his footsteps. Every article felt like a punch to the gut. Every checklist was a mirror. Manipulation, emotional abuse, control, isolation, gaslighting, silent treatment, cycles of love and cruelty. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't crazy. I was a victim. But naming it didn't free me. Leaving did, barely. The final straw wasn't dramatic. No screaming, no betrayal. It was just emptiness. I woke up next to him and felt absolutely nothing. No fear, no sadness. Just a quiet knowing that if I didn't leave soon, I'd disappear completely. So I packed a single bag. I left a note, and I walked out of that apartment like I was stepping off a cliff. He messaged me 5 hours later. "You're overreacting." Then, "I miss you." Then, "No one will love you like I did." And maybe that was the only honest thing he ever said. Because what he called love was a slow death. And I'm not sure anyone could destroy me with such precision again. Even now, months later, I still flinch when someone raises their voice. I still wait for kindness to turn into criticism. I still wonder if I'm too broken to be whole again. That's the aftermath of emotional abuse. It lingers like smoke after a fire. You escape the flames, but you still can't breathe right. But I'm learning. to trust my voice, to choose peace over chaos, to exist without seeking permission. Some nights, I still dream of him, not the monster, but the mask, the version of him who whispered that I was his soulmate, the one who kissed my forehead and said, "No one will ever understand me like you do." And I wake up crying, not because I miss him, but because I once believed him. And somewhere inside me, a small voice still asks, what if he was right? There are days I catch myself reaching for my phone, fingers hovering above the screen, wondering what I would say if I texted him. Not because I want him back, God no, but because there's still a part of me craving closure that will never come. That's the curse of surviving narcissistic abuse. You keep chasing resolution from someone who built their entire existence on your confusion. He never said goodbye. Narcissists don't give you the dignity of endings. They leave the door cracked, just enough for doubt to slip through, just enough for you to question whether it was really that bad. And the truth? Sometimes I do, because narcissistic relationships aren't made of constant pain. They're made of cycles. Intense highs followed by devastating lows. Love bombing, then silence. Worship, then humiliation. And in the middle of that storm, you start to cling to the moments of kindness, like they're evidence that you weren't insane, that the good parts were real. He once brought me flowers on a random Tuesday. My favorite, white tulips. He cooked dinner, lit candles, played my favorite song. I remember thinking, maybe we're turning a corner. Maybe all the coldness was just a phase. Maybe he really saw me. That night, he held me like I was made of glass. The next morning, I found out he'd gone through my emails while I slept. He said, "I had to. I can't trust you when you're so secretive." I stood there, mouth open, still in the sweatshirt he'd complimented hours earlier, and I apologized. That's what emotional abuse does. It trains you to apologize for being violated. I don't think people who haven't lived through it understand how subtle narcissistic control can be. How psychological abuse doesn't always leave bruises, but it leaves you doubting your worth, your voice, your sanity. Every opinion I had was dramatic. Every boundary I tried to set was selfish. Every time I tried to leave, he made himself the victim. "I'm just trying to love you," he'd say, eyes glassy. "Why are you making everything so hard?" And I'd believe him, because by then, I was convinced that love was supposed to hurt. He made me believe that my needs were too much, that my pain was inconvenient, that I was only lovable when I was quiet, compliant, and smiling on cue. I remember once, during a family dinner, he humiliated me in front of everyone. I'd laughed a little too loudly at a story his cousin told. That's all it took. Later in the car, he said, "You embarrassed me. You looked like a desperate little girl begging for attention." I spent the rest of the ride staring out the window, silent, the humiliation burning in my stomach like acid. The next day, he brought me coffee in bed. "I overreacted," he said, brushing my hair back. "But you have to learn how to behave when we're around people." It wasn't an apology. It was a warning. And I drank the coffee, because I had forgotten how to say no. He didn't kill me with fists. He killed me with little cuts of shame until I didn't know where I ended and he began. With every cruel word, he erased another piece of me, and called it love. Even now, when I talk about it, I find myself minimizing. It wasn't all bad. He had his own trauma. I probably triggered him. That's the programming. That's the manipulation still running in the background. I have to catch myself. I have to remind myself. Abuse is not excused by someone's pain. I was not put on this earth to absorb someone else's rage, just because they were wounded. I'm still recovering. Still learning how to exist in a world where I don't walk on eggshells. Still fighting the urge to ask for permission before expressing how I feel. I second-guess my happiness sometimes, like I don't deserve it, like I should earn peace. But I'm getting better. I've started laughing again, loudly, without apology. I've started saying no, to things, to people, to him, especially to him, when he tries to reach back into my life through anonymous messages and new accounts. He once said I'd never find someone who could love me like he did, and he was right, because no one else will ever love me like a weapon. I'm still healing, still piecing myself back together from a love that wasn't love at all, and some nights, I still wonder if I'll ever be whole again. But then I remember, wholeness isn't something he ever wanted for me, so maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what I deserve. Healing is quiet. That's what no one tells you. There are no grand moments, no fireworks, no dramatic turning points, just a series of small, nearly invisible choices. Getting out of bed when your body begs you to hide, saying no without explaining why, not answering his message even when your fingers itch to type, sitting with the loneliness without running back to the one person who made you feel most alone. I used to believe that healing from narcissistic abuse meant forgetting him, erasing his name from my mind, blocking him, deleting the pictures, throwing away the letters. But the truth is, he still lives in me, in the way I hesitate before asking for help, in how I panic when someone goes quiet, in the way I flinch at certain tones of voice. Trauma doesn't leave, it settles. It becomes muscle memory, and still, I move forward. Some mornings I wake up and feel completely free. I make coffee, I play music, I dance in the kitchen. I don't ask for permission to exist. I don't fear a slammed door or an angry silence. These mornings feel like tiny rebellions, like proof that I survived. Other mornings I grieve, not for him, but for me, the woman I was before he got to her, the one who laughed too loud, who trusted too easily, who loved with both hands open. He didn't just hurt me, he took that version of me and broke her into pieces. And sometimes I wonder if she's gone forever, but maybe she's still in here, just quieter now, wiser. I remember the last time I saw his face. It was 3 months after I left. He showed up at my work, smiling, calm, as if he hadn't burned my world to the ground. He asked if we could just talk, said he'd been doing some soul searching. "You were right about everything," he said. "I just didn't know how to love you the way you deserved." For 1 second, my heart cracked open. That's how skilled narcissists are. They know exactly what to say. They learn your language, your wounds, your softness, and they speak directly into it. But this time I didn't follow the script. I looked at him and said, "It's not that you didn't know how to love me. You knew. You just chose not to." He blinked, smiled tighter. "You've changed," he said, and I nodded. I had to. I walked away. He didn't follow. But that night, I cried for hours. Not because I missed him, but because I didn't. That was the saddest part, realizing that the person I once would have died for was now just a shadow, a ghost, proof of how much I'd been willing to lose to feel loved. He didn't love me. He used me as a mirror to admire himself. I wasn't his soulmate. I was just his supply. I'm still relearning what love means, that it doesn't feel like tension in your stomach or fear in your chest, that real love doesn't silence you. It listens. It doesn't isolate you. It holds space. It doesn't make you smaller. It celebrates your becoming. Some days I still struggle. Triggers come out of nowhere. A voice, a scent, a phrase, and suddenly I'm right back in that apartment, whispering apologies I never owed. But now, I know how to pull myself out. I know what happened. I know what he was. He was a narcissist. He controlled me through manipulation and gaslighting. He made me question my memory, my worth, my voice. He punished me with silence. He isolated me from everyone I loved. He called it love, but it was psychological abuse wrapped in promises he never meant to keep. He wanted obedience, not intimacy. He wanted power, not partnership. He wanted control, not connection. I was never crazy. I was never too sensitive. I was never the problem. And now, when I look in the mirror, I no longer see a broken woman trying to make sense of his cruelty. I see someone who survived, someone who walked through the fire and didn't let it turn her to ash. I still flinch at kindness sometimes, still hold my breath waiting for the backlash, still whisper, "I'm sorry," when no one's there. But I'm healing, slowly, quietly, truly. And maybe I'll never be the same, but maybe that's not a tragedy. Maybe that's how I finally become mine. There's something no one prepares you for after leaving a narcissist. The silence that follows is deafening, but this time, it's your own, not the punishment kind, not the silent treatment used to twist your insides into guilt. This silence is emptier, gentler, and terrifying in its unfamiliarity. For the first time, you're alone with your thoughts, and they're not being rewritten by someone else. But those first weeks, I didn't feel free. I felt lost, as if the chaos had been the only thing anchoring me. I had spent so long anticipating his moods, decoding his tone, minimizing my own needs just to keep the peace, that once the noise was gone, I didn't know who I was without it. The trauma wasn't just emotional, it had become physical. I jumped at sudden sounds. My heart raced every time I received a notification. I couldn't sleep unless I triple-checked the door locks. I kept the bathroom light on at night because darkness reminded me too much of the nights I cried silently beside him while he scrolled on his phone, pretending I didn't exist. That's what emotional abuse does. It rewires your nervous system to expect pain even in the absence of danger. He had trained me to perform love like a survival tactic. Smile, apologize, soften my voice, hold back tears, make myself easy to digest. I had become fluent in self-abandonment, because that was the only language he responded to. I remember one night in particular. I had just come back from visiting a friend, a female friend, someone he didn't approve of. She always told me gently that something about him didn't sit right. That evening, I was barely through the front door before he looked at me and said, "You think I'm stupid?" That was always his opening line when he was ready to twist something. "I didn't do anything," I whispered. "You left me alone all day. You think that's normal in a relationship? I told you where I was." "Yeah, but I didn't feel it. You could have lied. You probably lied." And just like that, I was on trial again. Hours of circular arguing, passive-aggressive comments, and finally, his ultimate weapon, withdrawal. No words, no touch, not even a glance. Days of pretending I didn't exist in our shared space. I used to think the yelling was the worst part, but it wasn't. It was the nothingness. He used silence like a scalpel, cutting without ever drawing blood. I'd rather be screamed at than erased. When I started therapy, I didn't even know what to talk about. I sat there staring at the floor, because how do you explain to someone that the most painful thing you've ever survived never left a mark? That you stayed, not because you were weak, but because you were convinced you were the broken one? He'd convinced me of that so well. "You're too emotional. You overthink everything. You twist my words." I started recording conversations on my phone just to prove to myself that he actually said the things I remembered. That's how deep the gaslighting went. That's how shattered my reality became. It wasn't until months later that I understood. I had been a supply, not a partner. He didn't love me. He used me to reflect the version of himself he needed to see. When I complied, I was his angel. When I questioned him, I became toxic. I was never allowed to be human, only useful. And when I finally stopped being useful, when I started saying no, he discarded me like an old object, coldly, casually. But then, of course, came the hoovering, the breadcrumb texts. "Hope you're okay. Just wanted to hear your voice. You'll always be the one." I almost fell for it again. Almost. But this time I recognized the cycle. Idealization, devaluation, discard, repeat. Not because I was strong. I chose to break it, but because I was done. Done shrinking, done doubting, done bleeding just to keep him comfortable. Now I find strength in the smallest things. Waking up and not bracing for emotional impact. Laughing without fear. Dressing the way I want. Taking up space without apology. Reclaiming joy, moment by moment. Some people say, "At least you learned something from it." As if trauma is a gift. No. What I learned despite him. Despite the control. Despite the manipulation. Despite the psychological abuse that nearly erased me. I wasn't hard to love. I was just too soft for someone who only knew how to hurt. He didn't want a partner. He wanted proof that he mattered, even if it meant destroying me. I still don't know exactly who I am without him, but I know who I'm not. I'm not his reflection. I'm not his supply. I'm not his punching bag. And every day I don't answer his messages is a sentence in the story of my return to myself. I survived a narcissist, and I'm still learning how to love the woman who made it out. But at least now, I know she's worth loving. Some nights, I still feel her. The version of me who stayed inside that toxic relationship because she thought love was supposed to hurt. She visits quietly, without judgment. Just stands there, at the edge of my bed, wearing those old clothes I used to pick so I wouldn't trigger his jealousy. So I wouldn't be accused of manipulation or be punished with another round of silent treatment. She doesn't speak. She just looks at me with those tired eyes. The same ones that scanned every word, every breath, wondering if I'd survive another wave of narcissistic abuse. I want to tell her she was never weak. She was a victim. That loving a narcissist wasn't a failure. It was a slow unraveling designed by someone who needed control more than connection. I want to tell her that emotional abuse doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it wears a smile. Sometimes it brings flowers after a night of gaslighting. But most of all, I want to tell her, it's over now, because it is. He no longer decides what I wear. He no longer rewrites my memories with gaslighting and guilt. He no longer freezes me out with his cruel, calculated, silent treatment. He no longer twists my kindness into a reason for emotional abuse. I carry the trauma, yes. The scars, the doubts, the damage that psychological abuse leaves behind. But I also carry truth. And truth is what finally set me free. Because now I know. He wasn't chaotic because he was hurt. He was cruel because it gave him power. He didn't lose control. He exercised it with surgical precision. He didn't want to heal. He wanted someone to bleed for him. He didn't want love. He wanted a mirror. He didn't want me. He wanted a supply. I was never too sensitive. Never too much. Never too hard to love. I was just too alive for someone who needed to dim every light around him in order to feel seen. He didn't love me. He consumed me. I wasn't crazy. I was being emotionally abused by a narcissist who called it love. Now I wake up without waiting for punishment. I speak without rehearsing. I dress without fear. I trust my memory. I trust my body. I trust my no. And when he tries to come back, because narcissists always come back, he finds silence. But this time, it's not the kind that wounds. It's not manipulation. It's not control. It's not another chapter in the toxic relationship he once ruled. This silence is mine. And in it, I finally hear myself. I survived narcissistic abuse. And every day I stay gone, I become more of who he tried to erase. Maybe I'll never be the same. But maybe that's not a tragedy. Maybe that's what freedom sounds like.